Okay, up until now we've been looking at all of the problems that exist in the atrias, in that little section of meat between the atria and the ventricle, and now we're going to be focusing on the ventricles themselves. So if you think about your, whoops, can't draw heart very well today. So we've looked at problems with the SA, we've looked at problems with the AV, we've taken that information and we've translated it over here to the bundle of His, and now we're going to be talking about issues that exist outside of this top region. So we're going to be looking specifically at the ventricles, and the first thing that we want to talk about are those premature ventricular contractions. And the reason why I want to spend a little time on the premature ventricular contractions is because the devil is in the details on this guy. The big thing with the PVCs is they carry several different names. If we look at this top one, let's just jump into it so I can show you guys. So if you looked at the previous presentation, you'll see that these two were brought up. If you look at the rhythm, and these guys, even though they look strange, they're still creating a pulse, because that is a QRS complex. So we're going to count it in the totals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So with this we have a heart rate of 80, and we know that we have two premature contractions that are coming early, and we have to identify where those hiccups originate. So we're going to look at those, and when we're looking at the hiccups, we look at this one and we look at this one, and they look almost the same. So that means that it's one singular spot, one spot over here in that ventricle that is irritable. So it's going to look the same every time that one spot kicks out. It's going to look the same. So if it is irritable and it is one spot, it's going to be called unifocal. So that's important to remember. The PVC is always going to be wide and bizarre, and it's never going to look like the rest. So if you compare this one to that one, you will see that the QRS complex does not match. This one is wide and bizarre in comparison to the one that should be normal. So we know that this is unifocal, and you want to name the underlying rhythm. So we look at the rest of the EKG strip, and you see that you have P waves in front of it. So we know it's a sinus rhythm with one irritable foci right here, and we're going to call that a sinus rhythm with unifocal, or you could say two unifocal PVCs. However you want to put that is fine. So that's how we would name the top one. The second one, if you look across here and you're like, okay, well, that looks like a QRS, then you start counting them out. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So again, we have another heart rate of 80, but when we look at it, we have 1 and we have 2 premature contractions. And you can see this is coming in on top of the previous QRS, and we also see that this one is coming in on top of the previous QRS complex. So when we're looking at those, we're like, my goodness, this looks nothing like that. They do not look the same. And that's because in the case of the second one here, you actually have two spots that are irritable in the ventricles, and each one is firing when it chooses. So because they are in different locations within the heart, they're going to have a different physiological appearance. So that's why they don't look the same. If they do not look the same, then they are called multifocal, because multifocal means that there's more than one spot that's irritable. And again, just like before, we're going to name the rhythm. So we know that we've got P waves in front of each of the QRS complexes. We have a rate of 80, so we're going to call this a sinus rhythm with multifocal PVCs. That's how you're going to name this one. Now there's some other details that come with PVCs besides unifocal and multifocal. You have to consider the way that they occur within the EKG strip. So if we look at this bottom one, you have a total of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You still have that heart rate of 80, but if you take a look, there's your normal QRS. In behind it is something wide and bizarre that doesn't look the same. That is a QRS, or excuse me, that is your PVC. There's no P wave, it's wide and bizarre, and you'll see that that PVC occurs every other beat. So when you're looking, it's here, it occurs here, it occurs here, and occurs here. If it's every other beat, it's called bigeminal. It's every other beat. You could have trigeminal, and if you see trigeminal, that means it's every third beat. Or you can have quadrigeminal. If you see quadrigeminal, that's every fourth beat. So you may also have to name it according to that. So if we're looking back at this and we want to name this strip, we know that there's P waves in front of the ones that are contracting appropriately, and then we have the irritable spot, and we look at that irritable spot, and that looks the same as that, so it's unifocal. We're going to name this a sinus rhythm with unifocal, bigeminal PVCs. That's how you would name this one. One other point of reference with PVCs is sometimes they will come in 2s and 3s. So you may have what they refer to as a couplet, and that's where you have two PVCs together, two PVCs in a row. So you may have a normal, let's just start a new one here. You may have a normal a normal QRS complex, and then you may see the PVC and then another PVC, and then it goes back to the normal QRS complex. So these two would be running together. That would be referred to as a couplet. If you have 3 or more, it's not really considered a triplet. It's actually considered a run of VTAC. So if you have 3 or more, it's going to be considered a run of VTAC. And that is how you name your PVCs.